Diane Rinaldo. I'm the Executive Director of the OpenRAN Policy Coalition, and I am pleased to be here with Dr. Tom Rondeau from the Department of Defense. First off, I'd like to thank TIP for hosting us today. I'm sure your past several days have been very successful, and we are happy to be here and having this discussion today. Dr. Rondeau, thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome.
You have been at the department for 6 months now, and the Principal Director in the 5G office. There's been a lot of changes in that office over the past couple of years, so I'm hoping maybe you could take the beginning time to give us a scene setter of how things have changed and your vision for how the office is going to evolve over the next year or so.
Yeah, so let me start by giving a little bit of a background on where this effort came from. A few years ago, Congress and the Department of Defense got together and decided that we were going to take a real big swing at U.S. leadership in the 5G space, taking back some of the work as far as the standards, as far as the tech development, and really trying to position them for use cases within the Department of Defense. We're the people that can execute really well and really fast when we get something coming behind us. And so we tried to take this tactic of national economic security as well as national security. So standard DoD day-to-day life and operations, and also that economic security piece of it. So everything that we executed from there was based on dual use concepts, things that were important to the commercial world and things that were important to the Department of Defense. So what we did is try to lay out groundwork for a lot of base operations. So U.S. military bases within the United States. How do we actually develop technologies and applications that could incentivize the commercial world to maybe leapfrog from what they were currently looking at from the markets to where we wanted to go? So how do we really incentivize smart ports, smart logistics, AR, VR, training and readiness, all those things you can see mixed in that commercial technology with DoD use cases. We were also, though, thinking about how do you effectively operate through existing infrastructure. The commercial world has spent hundreds of billions of dollars a year on building out the technology and what we call the global information infrastructure. That is a high value system that we are not using as effectively as we could. So how do we do that? But then you have to think that all of the work that we do in the DoD, the data is the lifeblood of operations. I think we all know that these days. And so when you're talking about information and data that the U.S. and the military are using, that is critical to get where it needs to go, to be trusted when it gets there, and to be reliant and to always have the reliable connectivity and access. If we're just using commercial infrastructure, we need to be aware that security is our biggest problem. And so the Operate Through portfolio was looking at these as from a security perspective. Can we use existing infrastructure? Can we trust existing infrastructure? And if we don't, how do we build technologies that can help us and run around that? So that's kind of where we started. I'm coming at it from not a totally different perspective, but maybe a different angle in some of the technologies and some of the focus areas that we need to do. I spent 6.5 years at DARPA, right, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. This is one of the main arms of research that the DoD has within the United States. Taking that mindset of how do we look at really critical technology gaps mixed with warfighting needs, and trying to make sure that we're bridging those gaps. So I think I'm maybe taking a little bit more operational focus than was in the past. It's not that dual use isn't important to me, it's that making sure that we are facing these operational challenges. So everything you see me doing is really in light of how do we make sure that our warfighters, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, Marines, get the support and the technology that they need in order to do their operations.
So I was noticing on your lapel pin, you are a proud DARPA alum. And so from that perch, I know you are always looking 6 steps ahead. So bringing that to your job now in stakeholder input and working with the different companies, what have you gauged as in how far advanced the commercial sector is, and where can DoD help grow that maybe as we talk about security, is there a deficit that DoD can really help input to strengthen their position?
Yeah, so my mind goes in a couple of different directions with that question. I think to start off with maybe something, hopefully it's controversial, I hate saying that because sometimes people are like, that's not controversial at all. But the thing that keeps coming to mind when it comes to commercial technology is, as much as I praise them for building out this GII, this global information infrastructure, the promises of 5G that we've been talking about now for almost 10 years, where are we? Where is really the technology? Where's the edge use cases? Where are the markets supporting all these grand visions? We still seem to be 10 years away from anything in that light. So I'm both grateful to and impressed by the technology capabilities. I'm disappointed with where the markets are. And so we try to incentivize some of those markets. But honestly, we're having a hard time with AR/VR. Getting the headsets that are really reliable and usable for our purposes. Now, in fairness, VAR is a very hard problem. There are a number of technology miracles that have to happen to get there, but the commercial world was kind of promising us maybe way in advance of when it was really ready. So that's one thing, is we're trying to continue to push and to, again, provide that funding offset for some of these capabilities so that the commercial world can explore these things with us, because we're giving that the problems of the DoD today can mirror some of the problems that the commercial sector can be facing as far as market opportunities tomorrow. So that's been part of the tension and the challenge here. And I think we've actually made some pretty good headway in a lot of the base work that we've been doing. Some very impressive stuff coming out there. Security, though, that's the other direction that I wanted to keep a focus on. Security is really interesting challenge, because the way that you have to separate these things, again, commercial versus DoD, the commercial world is financially driven. And when you started looking back at the, being raised in the 80s and putting my first computer together as a 386 processor in the mid 80s, and into the 90s, there was a lot of really fun stuff we were doing, and there was some hacking, and there was some, people just playing around. I had the opportunity to work at the Chaos Computing camp in Berlin once. These were legitimate hackers selling, stealing stuff and selling secrets. That's interesting. It became paramount when people figured out how to make money off of it. So ransomware, just stealing and selling secrets, that's when the hackers really started to ramp up their efforts. And that's when we got really serious about security, cryptography, and proper approaches to cybersecurity on the web. And we still see how not being there at the beginning is created those holes that people are still exploiting today. But we're much more serious about it today. Similarly, we have to look at where are the financial incentives for these kind of attacks in the 5G system and FutureG systems. That's where we've got to keep our focus on, because that we can at least reliably look to the commercial world to help us fix. When you look at the standards, 5G now has a security standards body. So really taking security seriously in those standards bodies. But they're going to tackle those things that are going to be, again, commercially problematic for industry. I also have to look at it from the side of the nation state threats. I have to understand and look, and of course, when it comes to that, that's all on the classified side. So we have to be working, and that's hard, right? How do we bridge those gaps between our work on the classified side and understanding that and influencing standards and technology? But I need to be thinking about those challenges, because those are going to be the things that the commercial world can't or won't, maybe, because of there's no economic incentive for them to be fixed. But I have to, if we're going to reliably use this. So that's, again, where we're going to have to come together and work together on this.
So keeping on the security theme, where do you see the major gaps, and what can you tell the commercial sector here today? Is it in supply chain? Is it in getting small companies to participate in these information sharing centers? Yeah,
I look at, as you well know, I split security into supply chain security, operations security, and cyber security. And supply chain security is, I think, something that we can work on, and that does go back to that national economic security discussion we talked about, creating the opportunities for people to build their small businesses or to have inventions or ideas in niche parts of the market or even niche parts of the technology, instead of the monolithic infrastructure that we've kind of built up until today. How do you allow people to build their new piece of this technology puzzle and be able to effectively sell that into the market? That's part of our supply chain diversity and part of the security aspects there that we can work on. The other thing, though, that I really been focusing on recently is back to the fact that 5G and the 3GPP and even ORAN Alliance have done a much better job of than ever before, which is focusing on security. However, a lot of that focus on security is optional, and a lot of it doesn't have a pull from the MNOs or from the operators. How can we better incentivize people to develop those standards, implement those standards, and make sure that the networks that we're operating on have the security in place that's been done? So there's still some gaps, but again, that's nation-state gaps. Can't talk about that. But the commercial security gaps, I think it's really in the implementation phase now, and how do we make sure that we're giving them the proper opportunities and incentives to implement those.
Are you pleased with forward progress, or do you think we have a ways to go?
We have a ways to go, and I think that's really from a policy perspective, as far as making those, creating the incentives. And that can be done in two ways, right? Put it into law, or at least policy that we won't buy unless these things are implemented, incentivize with money. Which, how many carrots and how many sticks can we put together to make this happen? I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. I have not gotten a sense of fear or anger from the commercial industries when I talk about this. They seem to be willing and wanting to help out, but again, they need to be pulled somehow. There needs to be something either pushing them or pulling them towards that. But I think that the conversations are going in the right direction.
Good. Well, if I could switch gears on you for a second, being from the OpenRAN Policy Coalition, I'm guessing you knew that an OpenRAN question was coming forward. So the NDAA authorized $120 million for OpenRAN at DoD. There's been a lot of conversations with not only in Congress but at the department on how to move forward. Where do you see the department embracing OpenRAN and moving forward with the different technologies?
Sadly, the appropriators took that away at the end, so we don't have that $120 million.
Right.
They authorized it, we did not. Yes.
The U.S. congressional system, you get authorized, and then the appropriators have to fund it. So it is a two-step process.
Yes. However, despite that small hiccup in the funding flow for OpenRAN, my work and what I am able to fund with the checkbook that I do have and the work that we are supporting, not all of that, all of it is pushed towards going to OpenRAN. Much of it is actually funding OpenRAN type technologies. Back to the security aspect of this. I don't believe you can really secure your systems without going to open architectures. Open architectures at a bare minimum. I come from an open source background. Implementing the infrastructure to do open source well, managed well, governed well, open source security foundation from the Linux Foundation is providing critical inputs and steps for how you actually secure open source systems. But what do they allow you to do? They allow you to craft the interfaces and understand those interfaces. Maybe there are more interfaces, but at least we better understand them than a closed box system that you have no inputs into. It allows you to instrument and to measure and monitor what's happening on your systems more effectively. And more from the end customer has more control over that surface than they ever have. And then you have the ability to respond to threats and figuring out how to convert a developed threat into a solution and roll out those solutions faster. If you heard me yesterday, I talked about the Log4j attack that happened last year. Big deal. We mostly consider that a successful use of the open source model because it was within weeks that 80% of those problems were patched around the world. It was a very rapid response that you wouldn't see in a closed system. So that's where I come from that open perspective, and why OpenRAN and these open type architectures and open source, when your business practice or when your classification allows you to do that, those are of benefit to us from that security model. So everything we're doing is really kind of keeping that in mind and making sure that we're focusing towards open source, focusing towards OpenRAN. One of the things that we probably want to pivot into, so I'll jump and start on that, is the Open 5G Challenge. And we're working together with NTIA, and you saw Alan Davidson was up here. So NTIA is helping run the Open 5G Challenge, where they're going to be last year they studied the interfaces between a CU and a DU of an ORAN architecture, and this year we're actually looking at the interfaces for mobility, the XN interface, to make sure that not only can CU and DUs from different vendors talk to each other, now can they actually hand off for creating mobility between different vendors and ensuring that we're creating that infrastructure and testing capabilities to ensure that these open interfaces and open architectures are interoperable as well.
So would you say that this is one of the first times since we've really adopted the zero trust model that we're able to take a platform and architecture like OpenRAN and truly add in security from the beginning?
I think in this,
it seems to be. I'm not sure.
It seems to be. I'll have to. I haven't thought of it in that specific. So let me see if something else pops in mind. But ZTA, zero trust architectures, are fairly new anyways. So probably because we never really had a definition for it until now. And luckily, NIST has done some great work on creating a ZTA implementation plan. And the DoD under CIO, they've created their DoD's ZTA implementation plan that models NIST very well. So they're compatible. It's just, again, how is it tailored to the DoD versus the general world? And I keep I talked to Mr. Sherman, the DoD CIO, quite a bit about this. We are the playgrounds for ZTA. So we're actually working hard on ensuring that we can implement those structures. We are funding some ZTA architectures within our base operations, and there's some specific security features about the ORAN concept. Again, those interfaces, how do you make sure those interfaces are locked down, that we're starting to investigate right now.
That's fantastic. So we discussed stakeholders earlier. How many companies do you work with, I would say, on a day in and day out basis? And is that number growing? How can people get more involved?
So we have the number is somewhere well over 100 companies on contract in all of the 5G work that we've been funding for the past couple of years. So we interface mostly with like the prime level, so it's it's a kind of a pyramid structure. But yeah, on any given day, we could be talking to one of 100 plus different vendors out there. Most of them U.S. based, but not solely. So we are keeping our eyes on the great interest in our partners and allies working with us on this. So those have been the base of what we've been doing. What we're really trying to go towards now is to continue to grow this space. But I have to be careful with this because the whole promise of working with commercial industry is you're solving problems, you're creating solutions that are commoditized and more cost-effective solutions. Am I good? All right. So I don't want to recreate the same structures that the DoD usually does, which is make a very parochial, very siloed solution to every single problem. So we need to cut across this. So those are the opportunities I see, is to make sure that we are co-investing and building partnerships so that we can offset costs as needed, we can buy stuff as needed, and the commercial world can continue to look at us as ways to create those new technologies that then allow them to build their businesses off of it.
No, absolutely. I know we're getting close to time, so I do have one final question for you. And I know a lot of folks here are interested in your thoughts of what keeps you up at night. Yeah,
I knew this question was coming, and it's a hard one to answer for me. Spending so much time on within the U.S. government and the DoD, the real things that keep me up at night are not appropriate for me to talk about. But what
that's what they were all looking for.
Even the Spanish wine will not open me up on that one, so don't even try that. So really the thing that keeps me up at night is missed opportunities. What we often go towards is I've often talked about this. My job is fairly easy. I've been working for the U.S. government and the DoD for most of my career through various capacities. I get to focus on the warfighter. And that clarifies most of the decisions I have to make, is to make sure that my warfighters are safe and they get the technology and the best things that we can get to them. So that helps. What that does, though, is it leads you to addressing threats and not opportunities. Because you can kind of, opportunities become hard because there's so many possibilities out there. How to use the limited resources that you have to invest in those. But sometimes it's hard to get the support unless you actually say, if we don't do this, our adversaries are going to take over. Okay, great, but there's so many things that we could be doing to drive that leadership to make them worried about us, and that's what I really miss right now, and that's what's hard to make sure that we can justify. What are those opportunities that we're not taking advantage that we're going to regret in 5-10 years?
It's great to hear you say that. I say the one thing about OpenRAN that I believe that this message has resonated so well is that we focus on innovation. We give people something to run to as opposed to run away from.
Yeah, that's great.
Tom, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.